The Native Americans lived in five main tribes: the Chickasaw, Choctaws, Creeks, Cherokees, and Seminoles. They had settlements across Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. The tribes had lived on their native land for generations. Andrew Jackson became president in 1829. He and other politicians wanted this area occupied by Indians to be open for Americans. Jackson persuaded Congress to pass the Indian Removal Act. This law stated that the Native Americans living east of the Mississippi River were to be removed and relocated in the west. This meant that thousands of people would have to leave the only home they've ever known to take a long journey on foot to the Indian Territory. This was land which is now known as Oklahoma, set aside by the U.S. government for the Indians. It had poor land for farming and was hundreds of miles away from their home. In 1830, Mississippi legislature forced the leaders of the Choctaw to sign the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, which gave the U.S. all the land east of the Mississippi, a total of 7.5 million acres. The Choctaw were the first tribe to be relocated. They were moved during the harsh winter. Most made the journey on foot, and officials didn't supply enough food or supplies for them. 1/4 died of disease, cold, or starvation. The Creeks signed the treaty at Fort Jackson in 1814, which gave 23 million acres of land in Georgia to the U.S., and the tribe would be relocated to the Indian Territory. The Creeks heard about the Choctaws' hardships during their trip, and in 1836, they tried to resist removal. Federal troops moved in and captured about 14,500 of them. The rest of the tribe were led to the territory, some even in chains. A Creek woman said, "The awful silence that showed the heartaches and sorrow at being taken from the homes, and even separation from loved ones." Next were the Chickasaws. In 1818, they negotiated a treaty for better supplies for the trip, and the U.S. got their land in upper Mississippi. The Chickasaw traveled west to their new land in the Indian Territory, much less suited for farming. Even though they negotiated for better supplies, many still died. In Florida, leaders of the Seminole were forced to sign the Treaty of Moultrie Creek. Osceola was the leader of the tribe. He told his people to resist removal with force. Settlers in the area wanted the Indians gone, so Andrew Jackson sent in his troops. In 1837, the U.S. had about 9,000 men fighting in the war. The Seminoles had 900 to 1,400 warriors in 1835 and less than 100 in 1842. The Seminoles were very outnumbered, but they still refused to give up their homeland. They hid in the swamps of the Everglades and battled the soldiers. Osceola was captured and then died in prison. The war ended in 1842 with a U.S. victory. 3,800 Seminoles were transported to Indian Territory and about 300 stayed in the Everglades. The war was known as the longest and most costly of the Indian conflicts in the United States. The Cherokee signed their treaty in 1791. It was called the Treaty at Holston River. However, the Cherokee was trying to avoid removal by adopting American culture. They welcomed missionaries to set up schools to teach their children to read and write in English. The Cherokees even tried to model a new government like America's. In 1828, the tribe began publishing the Cherokee Phoenix. It was a newspaper published in both English and Cherokee. Sadly, their attempt to stay in their homeland failed. After gold was discovered in the Cherokees' land, all their treaty rights were ignored. The Cherokee tribe still refused to leave their home. Georgia wanted their land, so the government sent in the state militia to attack Cherokees' towns. Cherokees sued the state and said that the Georgia government had no power over them and that they were a free nation. In 1832, the Supreme Court was under the leadership of Chief Justice John Marshall. He agreed with the Cherokee Indians. This case was called Worcester v. Georgia. The court ruled that the Cherokee Nation had a distinct community in which the laws of Georgia had no force. However, the Georgia government ignored the court's ruling, but President Jackson took no action. "John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it," Jackson supposedly said. By not enforcing the laws made by the Supreme Court, he violated his role to uphold the laws. However, no court members or citizens protested his decision. U.S. troops began to take the Cherokee tribe to the Indian Territory. Very few escaped to hide in the mountains of North Carolina. The long journey they made became known as the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears was an 800-mile forced march taken by the Cherokees. Many suffered from disease, hunger, and harsh weather. One-fourth of the tribe, which was about 18,000, died on the trip.